they say the World War II guys were the best generation. Well, those who fought every war since then were the best of their generation. They went, they served, they sacrificed, and they fought like tigers. They were noble.
By the fall of 1964, the South Vietnamese government is in political disarray, while its military is crumbling under the advances of nearly 150,000 Viet Cong soldiers, who control nearly half of the South Vietnamese countryside. Supplied with weapons and reinforcements from the north, the Viet Cong are farmers by day and fighters by night, capable of launching hit-and-run attacks and then melting back into the jungle, undetected. Both the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese view the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution as a declaration of war by the Americans, and they intend to fight. In the pre-dawn hours of November 1st, 1964, the Viet Cong launch a surprise attack on one of the 4 U.S. air bases in South Vietnam. It is their first direct assault against U.S. personnel inside the country. 4 Americans are killed.
We had advisors and military assets in South Vietnam for years. The Viet Cong had never intentionally tried to destroy them.
23-year-old Joe Galloway is a correspondent for United Press International. For years, he's been closely following America's growing involvement in Vietnam.
We were getting more deeply involved in that situation, and that it was going to become America's war, my generation's war. And I'd always said to myself that if a war came along during my time, I wanted to cover it. I started driving my bosses absolutely crazy, demanding, begging, pleading for a transfer to get in position for the war I was sure was coming.
And a live force of more than 8,000 men.
On February 7th, 1965, Viet Cong forces strike a second U.S. airbase. 8 Americans are killed, and another 126 wounded. Weeks after the Pleiku attack, President Johnson authorizes a large-scale bombing campaign inside North Vietnam. Codenamed Operation Rolling Thunder, the strategy is twofold. Cripple the North Vietnamese war effort by destroying military and industrial targets, and crush their will to fight by demonstrating the awesome extent of American power.
God, you can feel the excitement building. We finally got intelligence that 200 NVA soldiers are in the hills of the Chupong Mountain.
UPI reporter Joe Galloway has joined up with the 1st Cavalry, one of the Army's new air-mobile assault units. After months of fighting small, frustrating skirmishes, U.S. forces are preparing to launch their first major assault against 200 North Vietnamese soldiers using an experimental new tactic, air mobility. Equipped with UH-1 Hueys, the 1st Cavalry is designed to insert soldiers into combat using helicopters. For this encounter, they will make their first attempt at inserting a force of 450 Americans to fight the 200 NVA. But as the men prepare for battle, a potentially serious problem weighs on the mind of the commanding officer, Colonel Hal Moore. The spot where they will land, a small clearing designated Landing Zone X-Ray, was chosen because of its close proximity to the enemy. It is too small, however, to land more than 8 helicopters at a time. With each chopper able to carry only about 6 men, it will take several hours to get all 450 soldiers on the ground.
Any commander's fear in a case like that, if you land and you've only got a few of your troops, less than 100, and the enemy comes on you, you're in a bind. If you go down, the LZ is the landing zone is closed, and whoever's in there dies.
At 10:19 a.m., Firebase Falcon, 5 miles from the landing zone, lets loose a vicious barrage of artillery into the enemy positions. The 28-minute onslaught is meant to clear the LZ so the helicopters can land safely. At 10:35 a.m., the first U.S. choppers lift off and begin the 13-minute flight to the landing zone. Four miles outside of LZ X-Ray, the choppers drop to treetop level. In front of them lays a landscape of smoke and exploding U.S. ordnance. The barrage is intricately timed to stop just 1 minute before the soldiers hit the ground. If the timing is off by even a few seconds, they will risk being hit with their own artillery.
I was staying close to the tent where the radios were.
Radios were at brigade headquarters, so that I could hear if anything started happening. Bravo Company is sweeping the area around the LZ. So far, all is quiet. Already the choppers are delivering the second load of soldiers. Everything seems to be going according to plan. Until 11:15 a.m. Bravo's first platoon captures a single, unarmed NVA soldier. He's immediately taken to the command center for interrogation. At 11:20, the prisoner makes an incredible revelation. He tells the interpreter there are 3 full battalions of North Vietnamese soldiers on the mountain, and that all of them want very much to kill Americans. It's unbelievable. 3 battalions, that's almost 1,600 soldiers. No one can believe what they're hearing. We've got less than 200 men on the ground, meaning we're outnumbered 8 to 1.
Roger, say again.
Within minutes, U.S. and North Vietnamese forces are locked in vicious combat. While the men on the ground desperately attempt to keep the North Vietnamese from overrunning the LZ, the pilots of the 1st Cavalry continue to ferry in the remainder of the 450 men amid a vicious torrent of enemy bullets and rockets.
There are things about battle that movies cannot teach you, and that is the true, horrendous noise of battle. Bullets cracking, bombs bombs landing, artillery shells exploded, people screaming. It's just a cacophony that's almost deafening.
After nearly 8 hours of battle, casualties are mounting, and supplies are running low. But with night fast approaching, all further landings must be called off until dawn. The 450 battered Americans are on their own, and will have to survive the night in the face of an overwhelming enemy.
Last night, the enemy launched several small attacks against our lines. The dead still lay where they were killed. It's too dangerous to try and move them.
Joe Galloway is the only correspondent at Landing Zone X-Ray. Of the 450 soldiers on the battlefield, 85 are already dead or wounded. Those still alive are desperately in need of ammunition and supplies.
Word is that reinforcements are going to try and land a few miles away and try to fight their way over to us. God, I hope they make it.
At the base of the Chupong Mountain are nearly 1,600 enemy soldiers. A few hundred yards in front of them stands only a thin line of Americans, pounded and exhausted from nearly 24 hours of constant fighting. The enemy's sporadic attacks during the night were to determine the most vulnerable points in the U.S. lines. Now they know the best way to breach them, and they are preparing to put this knowledge to use.
At 6:50 a.m., 200 NVA soldiers hit C Company's 1st and 2nd platoons. Company Commander Bob Edwards is shot through the shoulder, leading his men in a counterattack. His XO, Lieutenant Arrington, runs up to assist, but within minutes he is also shot, right through the chest. The enemy is within 75 yards of their lines. Some of the men are down to hand-to-hand combat. At 7:15, NVA soldiers hit Delta Company, right where they connect with Charlie Company. The line is starting to break down. Enemy's bullets are passing right
through the command area where we were sitting. And I just fell over on my belly and got as flat as I could. And finally, Colonel Moore looked at the Air Force liaison lieutenant, Charlie Hastings. Moore looks at him and says, "Call Broken Arrow." Broken Arrow was a code at that time, meant that an American unit was in dire danger of being overrun and wiped out. And when that call was given, every available fighter bomber in Vietnam diverted to that place to deliver their bombs. about then that I heard Colonel Moore yelling, "Get him off of us, Charlie! Get him off of us!" And I looked up, and there are two F-100 Super Sabre jets like this. They're coming directly at us. The lead plane has already punched the pickle switch and will turn loose canisters of napalm. Hal was trying to stop the second guy from dumping his on us. But unfortunately for 2 or 3 engineer demolition guys, they were right in the path. And in that flame, I could see these 2 men dancing and screaming. And someone yelled, "Get this man's feet." And I reached down and picked him up, and his boots crumbled. The flesh on his ankles just peeled off. I could feel the ankle bone in the palm of my hands. And we carried him over to where the wounded were. It was a young specialist named Jim Nakayama out of Rigby, Idaho. Married. Wife had a baby that week. He died 2 days later. That boy is my nightmare.
Children, your daddy's home.
Some had families waiting. For others, their only family would be the men they bled beside. There were no bands, no flags, no honor guards to welcome them home. They went to war because their country ordered them to. But in the end, they fought not for their country or their flag. They fought for each other.
Dear Barbara, I have no words to express to you my sadness at the loss of Jack. The world is a lesser place without him. But I know he is with God and the angels, and even heaven is improved by his presence there. I know you too are sure of this, and yet this knowledge can't diminish his loss and your grief. With abiding respect and affection, Hal Moore.
We who have seen war never stop seeing. In the silence of the night, we will always hear the screams. So this is our story. For we were soldiers once, and young.
Now let's set the record straight. There's no argument over the choice between peace and war, but there's only one guaranteed way you can have peace, and you can have it in the next second. Surrender. Admittedly, there's a risk in any course we follow other than this, but every lesson of history tells us that the greater risk lies in appeasement. And this is the specter our well-meaning liberal friends refuse to face, that their policy of accommodation is appeasement. And it gives no choice between peace and war, only between fight or surrender. If we continue to accommodate, continue to back and retreat, eventually we have to face the final demand, the ultimatum. And what then? When Nikita Khrushchev has told his people he knows what our answer will be. He has told them that we're retreating under the pressure of the Cold War, and someday, when the time comes to deliver the final ultimatum, our surrender will be voluntary, because by that time, we will have been weakened from within spiritually, morally, and economically. He believes this because from our side he's heard voices pleading for peace at any price, or better rev than death, or as one commentator put it, he'd rather live on his knees than die on his feet. And therein lies the road to war, because those voices don't speak for the rest of us. You and I know and do not believe that life is so dear and peace so sweet as to be purchased at the price of chains and slavery. If nothing in life is worth dying for, when did this begin? Just in the face of this enemy? Or should Moses have told the children of Israel to live in slavery under the Pharaohs? Should Christ have refused the cross? Should the patriots at Concord Bridge have thrown down their guns and refused to fire the shot heard round the world? The martyrs of history were not fools. And our honored dead, who gave their lives to stop the advance of the Nazis, didn't die in vain. Where then is the road to peace? Well, it's a simple answer after all. You and I have the courage to say to our enemies, there is a price we will not pay, there is a point beyond which they must not advance. Winston Churchill said the destiny of man is not measured by material computations. When great forces are on the move in the world, we learn we're spirits, not animals. And he said there's something going on in time and space and beyond time and space, which, whether we like it or not, spells duty. You and I have a rendezvous with destiny. We'll preserve for our children this, the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.